Hello Senators and Legates. Welcome to Total War Tactics. Today we're going to take a closer look at a tactic which has shown to be very effective in real life. But now we need to figure out if it's good enough for Total War. As you can see, we're going to be doing this in Rome 2 with the Divide Et Impera mod enabled. We're going to be covering a tiny bit of historical context, the theoretical formation, how to execute it, the army composition, how to use it in game against both the player and the AI, and last but not least, how to defeat it. If there are any parts of this video you want to see, there are timestamps in the description for you to use. But with that said, let's introduce the tactic. The echelon formation is when you deploy your formation diagonally. Many believe it dates back to the ancient times of Romans and Greeks. This is so because in many ways the echelon formation actually resembles the oblique order. However, there are a few distinct differences between its modern and ancient use. Mainly these can be recognized in the declining fraction of the formation. For the ancient oblique order, it is supposed to deny engagement for as long as possible, whereas it serves more of a supportive function for the units just ahead of them in the modern use. Leading on from this, the military of today still uses this tactic. It will be used to deploy troops, ships and aircrafts, so as many units as possible will have both maneuverability and line of sight in as many areas as possible. Even the riot police have used it to great effect on occasion. But let's get over to the execution part, as that is where the fun begins. Deployment wise, each unit will be positioned behind and to the right or left of the unit in front of them. As already mentioned, this is to give the best line of sight possible, so each unit can be used. This of course is not possible in Rome 2, so I've just made a few adjustments. We're going to make a shock wave of sorts. Basically the first unit will charge forward, then the second and so on. That is how it was described in the manga Kingdoms. No, I haven't actually read the manga, but the series was mentioned in one of my sources and find it quite funny. Furthermore, the formation is very vulnerable to being outflanked, which in many cases would make it obsolete. Hence, I've added my own personal twist to this tactic, adding 2 or 3 units in behind to screen the attacking line, or just to have units in reserve to defend it. They're always a good thing to have, no matter what tactic you're using. This is of course the first time I'm adding my own ideas, so please let me know if you think this is a good thing or just want me to cover the actual historical formation instead. Personally, I find it more interesting to make a viable tactic than just figuring out historical tactics doesn't work, which we kind of already know. Moving on to the composition, I could imagine any faction with shock infantry would excel with this tactic. However, as I personally ain't confident with these factions, I chose the Nervii. Their roster I've played with a lot, plus people keep saying they are one of the best factions for sword rush tactics, such as this one. This was my army. As the keen-eyed person might have realized, I'm not using any skirmishers except for the ones on my chariots. And this is because I feel they'll just get in the way of what we are trying to do. Instead, I could focus a lot more on good quality infantry, such as these guys. I'll expect them to get most of the kills, along with the Remi cavalry and chariots. Now, let's go over to our online battle against the talented player Gio D. This one was out of this world in excitement. Nervii versus Odrysians. Gio instantly pulled up with his Javcav to my flank. He had done this before, killing most of my cavalry, so I was determined to take them out. After seeing his other cavalry was all the way over on the other side, I thought to myself, screw it, and instantly our cat and mouse game began. I tried to block him off even with the Echelon formation, which also put pressure on his right flank, forcing him to focus on multiple areas. However, after a couple of minutes of doing this, the rest of his cavalry plus a spear unit turned up. I expected a charge and instantly knew this would be bad, so I pulled out. Instead, I would attack with the infantry, but as I was about to charge, he sent forth 2 spear units to block my charge. Luckily, I reacted fast enough to stop most of my units to prepare for a second wave of Thracians. I then did a bold move, sending through my chariots into his lines, making the job of my swordsmen easier. However, what I didn't see at the time was his high number of skirmishers in the area. On the other hand, I finally realized how vulnerable his general was. With the balance of power in his favor, I knew this was my only chance. I took most of my cavalry to shift them over to that flank, send them through the gaps of our battle line, and caught him almost off guard. There was a moment of tension in the air. Many units started to rout from both sides, both generals even, but it was us who came out on top. We had won on our right flank, his men were demoralized, and all we needed to do was continue sweeping around. However, here comes the catch. I wanted to keep my general alive, so we still had some morale left in our troops. I fell back and regrouped my lines, but what I didn't realize was that Gio's remaining units were mostly shock infantry. If I had stayed in combat, I could have won. Now, they could get a devastating charge onto my units, causing the downfall and defeat of my army. One of the best battles I've ever had. Gio is truly a better player than me, but the fact that I was able to keep up with him through this tactic tells me it got some potential. I'll leave the stats here, pause and take a look if you'd like. If not, let's see how the tactic performs against the AI. This battle wasn't anywhere near as intense as the last one. My Mauryan army moved forward slowly till our archers were in range of the enemy. We made a massive charge through the Median hail of arrows flying towards us. Our reserves were used to plug the gaps in our lines and overall just give us superiority in numbers throughout the battle. Basically, we won this battle with ease. So, in terms of how to defeat this tactic, apart from being a better Total War movement player with better skills such as Gio, there are a few ways to defeat it. A pike front line would be an instant counter, for example, as now it is impossible to get the charge the tactic desire. The Echelon player will be forced to use a new one. That might do the trick, but that is not what we are talking about here. We're talking about the Echelon formation only. Another way is by using the good old wedge formation. The Echelon is typically spread very wide, making it vulnerable in the center. Of course, that's why they have the reserves, but if they're drawn away, they can't help. And the last method I want to talk about is the possibility to use the oblique order. Deployment wise, it can be quite a gamble, depending on how the Echelon user forms up. However, as the furthest away units doesn't engage, you will have a strong chance. For my final verdict for this tactic, I think it's got a lot of potential that definitely works for DEI, especially with shock infantry. But now, I want to hear what you think about this tactic in the comments below. And with that said, goodbye and spread happiness.